What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Shuggy from Shook Earth Media, and today we are talking about Monkey Island. It's a very nostalgic video because this is a gaming franchise that I grew up on and was a huge fan of. I loved all the Lucasarts adventure games. For those who don't know, Lucasarts was owned by George Lucas, and it was a part of Lucasfilm, and they were an early video game developer. They were really pushing forward these storytelling games with a sense of humor, usually comedies, but they were pushing forward storytelling in the video game medium. I think a good comparison might be that LucasArts is the Pixar of adventure gaming back in the day. And one of their flagship series that they're most well known for is Monkey Island. It's a game series about Guybrush Threepwood, a pirate who is trying to prove himself and is fighting his arch nemesis, the ghost pirate LeChuck. This is a series about adventure, going out and searching for treasure, even though the treasures usually end up being pointless. The core of the game is about causing as much mischief as you can, solving puzzles, exploring the environment, and talking to interesting, amusing characters. Usually screwing them over or inconveniencing them in some way to forward your swashbuckling adventures. Now, this is a comedy series. It's very tongue-in-cheek. It's all about self-satire. It doesn't take itself seriously at all. It's just really about making you laugh, not necessarily about the plot and what's going on there. So that's the heart of the franchises, and the characters and the jokes, and later in the series, the voice acting, because the first two games did not originally have voice acting, although they have new versions with voice acting that I highly recommend if you haven't played any of these games before. So I'm really nostalgic for this. Adventure games, they fell out of favor at LucasArts even, so eventually they were put on the back burner. They put out a couple sequels to Monkey Island. There was a third game and a fourth game, but eventually they became too expensive to develop and not popular enough in sales. So LucasArts kind of shifted to doing more Star Wars games and orienting the company that way. So they stopped doing these original IPs, which is what they originally came out with. They weren't originally the Star Wars development house. They were developing original stories and ideas specifically for video games. So I'm a big fan of LucasArts back in the day. That's why I was such a big fan of Telltale Games before the Walking Dead stuff. You guys know I'm a Walking Dead fan. I love Walking Dead. But way before Telltale Walking Dead came out, I was always a Telltale fan from day one, because they launched with Sam & Max, which is a sequel to another LucasArts classic called Sam & Max Hit the Road. Telltale Games came out with a sequel to Sam & Max Hit the Road called Sam & Max Season 1, which is now called Sam & Max Save the World. And from the beginning, Telltale Games was all about adventure gaming, bringing that into the modern age, basically born out of the cancellation of a previous Sam & Max game that was in the works at one point at LucasArts. Once that project was canceled, a lot of people wanted to make their own company to make adventure games specifically, and that's what they did. They created Telltale Games, and some of those people worked on the original Monkey Island. So from the beginning, they were focused on adventure games. Now, Telltale Games, once they made the Walking Dead game, as much as I love it story-wise, they shifted gears away from traditional adventure games, and they became the more cinematic, choice-based storytelling type of stuff that we get from adventure games nowadays. But back in the day, they were about solving puzzles. They were called point-and-click adventure games because you move your mouse around and you explore the environment. It's somewhat pixel hunting to see what you can pick up and what you can interact with, who you can talk to. You got to talk to all the characters, see all of the screens, and explore the environment that way. So I like that element, and I always kind of lamented the loss of that style of game when Telltale Games shifted direction. As much as I liked what they were producing, I was still a fan, always a fan of Telltale, especially the Walking Dead games. But you guys got to understand that I come from the old school adventure game mindset. So I really like the puzzle solving part of the program. And that, bringing us back to this game today, Return to Monkey Island is a return to form of that. It is very much in the point and click style. It's simplified from the early games, the early Monkey Island games, and even the sequels. They had actions. You had to pick an action and then click on the object. Like you had to click pick up and then click on the object. Or in later games, you click on the object and then all the options you can do with it came up in like a little medallion, and the medallion had the different verbs you can use. So they take that away completely, and it's just point and click, simple, contextual. There are 2 options on every object, and you mouse over it. It tells you what the left mouse button does and what the right mouse button does. That's great. Simplifying it, even we never needed the verbs to begin with, if I'm being honest. So I'm okay with them taking the verbs out of it, and we are focusing on the puzzle solving, the exploration, and the storytelling, and the jokes, of course. The jokes are the most important part in this game. So what's this one about? Guybrush is a little older, not wiser though, which we wouldn't want him that way anyways, because it wouldn't be fun if he was wise. It's fun that he makes stupid decisions. It's fun that he's always fucking people over on the way to get what he wants. That's what we love about Guybrush, and that's what we see in this game. But it is nice to see him aged up a little bit. He's further in his career, he's further in his life, and we start off with a twist. And I like the twist because we start off by picking up right where Monkey Island 2 leaves off. The original game's director, Ron Gilbert, has returned for this one, and that's part of what makes it so exciting. Is we got the original vision, the guy who wrote the jokes in the first game, and it's really great to see his style back in the series. I think that the series has never really been the same since he left. As good as Curse of Monkey Island is, and I really like the Telltale Games one. For those who don't know, Telltale Games did a Monkey Island. It was good. It was a little bit more mature, had a little bit more drama to it. They don't do that in this one. They take the drama out. They actually they reference things that happen in the sequels. There's a character called Murray, the demonic possessed skull that is the funniest character in the series. He was invented in the third game, so he is now in this game too. So I like that we're taking the best aspects of the sequels, but we're not sticking to anything like it's gospel. But I was pleasantly surprised by how many references there were to the sequels, especially the Telltale Games one. The Telltale Games one I suspected would get ignored completely, and it didn't. There are extensive jokes related to things that happen in that game. So if you're a fan, you get all the Easter eggs. It's pretty awesome. But if you haven't played those and you only played the first 2, that it pretty much picks up. You haven't missed anything. And if you're a new player, you can jump in here. They do their best to catch you up, but it is mostly oriented towards the fans, which is great. We get a lot of the fan service stuff, but it's not complicated enough that you'll be lost. You will absolutely understand the plot and everything where it's going on. It just won't have that same significance to you if you're new to the series. If you're new to the series, I would recommend the remake of the first one with the new artwork and the voice acting. That's probably the best place to start as far as Monkey Island is concerned, but this isn't a bad entry to start with either. So back to the twist that starts off the game, we pick up right where the second game leaves off. This is, of course, a reference to the fact that Ron Gilbert left the series after the second one, and he's coming back to it, so he wants to come back and start from where he ended, and I really respect that. And it's a fun little twist because it adds a new explanation for the end of the second game. So the end of the second one had a weird ending where it turned out that the story you thought you'd been watching was actually, it could have been a dream or children playing. It shows the main character Guybrush and the villain LeChuck as little kids in a carnival. So it's like, did this really happen, or was it just a child's imagining? That's where we pick up with this one. It starts at that exact same carnival, and the explanation we have for it is that that ending is, minor spoiler alert for the beginning of the game, but it turns out that those kids we see at the end of the second one, the one who's Guybrush, who we think is Guybrush, is actually Guybrush's son and his best friend Chucky, and they're playing together, referencing stories that his father told the young Guybrush. So Guybrush is a father. They had a little intro segment with just those two characters, the kids, and that's kind of like the tutorial where you find out the controls and you're like, okay, if I double click I can run and stuff like that. So I thought it was a great intro, and it's the frame story for the rest of the game is Guybrush telling a story to his son. So I think that works. You didn't need the frame story to make it work, but I like how it starts, and I like the interjections where at the different points in the story Guybrush talks to his son and stuff. So I like that, basically letting the son be the voice for the audience. In a way, it's like that's the audience surrogate. So he's asking the storyteller questions that we would be asking the storyteller. So I like that dynamic. So I like the frame story. I like the intro. And that just kicks off the storyline. And we're telling a story about finding the actual secret of Monkey Island. And that's, of course, a running joke because the original game is called The Secret of Monkey Island. But there was no secret. So everybody's like, what does that mean? So that's the joke we pick up with. Again, like I said, self-referential. And it's really just an excuse for us to have the same kind of format of the first game, but with different goals. In the first game, Guybrush is trying to become a pirate. He's got 3 trials to do. And then he's going on a voyage to Monkey Island to save Elaine, it turns out, who's his love interest and all that. And in this one, it's still a voyage to Monkey Island to get the secret, but LeChuck is going as well. So Guybrush is just like, why don't I just go into that ship that's already going? So because there's new leadership in Melee Island, which is where we start. It's the same place we start in the original game, so we got the callbacks going. But it's similar, but it's different enough that it's still, it feels new. So it's the same kind of format that we're in Melee Island, we're on a voyage, etc. Except instead of getting a ship, getting a crew, all that stuff we did in the first one, we're just getting the things that we need to board LeChuck's ship. So it's a fun setup. I like it, and we get a lot of past cameos of all of our favorite characters. And of course we got Murray, like I said, we got the Voodoo Lady, we got the map maker guy Wally. We got a bunch of other characters I'm not going to name specifically. I'll call it a kind of a spoiler to reveal too much. But there's a couple cameos. We got some new characters here. I like the new characters too. Some of my favorite side characters are the skeleton crew member on LeChuck's crew who falls overboard and gets caught in the rafters. And you continually go down to tease him and mock the fact that he's stuck there. Of course, he's immortal, so he can't drown, but nobody can see him, so he's just stuck under there. He's got a book of terrible poetry that's really embarrassing that you have to convince him to hand over while continuing not to help him get up. So it's really funny. There's also a guy who has a museum of pirate lore, and most of it's related to Guybrush's career, and he gets absolutely everything wrong. So there's a lot of that absurdity that we love from these characters, and there's that little bit of satire. They're poking fun at something. Each character serves a purpose in that way, and it's a lot of fun. So pretty strong characters across the board. So now we get into what I love most about these games, which is the exploration, the puzzle solving, and all of that. And I think this game excels in it. And I'll just jump ahead, and I'm not going to spoil any story stuff, but Chapter 4, this game is organized into 5 chapters, and the first 4, of course, get more complicated, and then 5 is the big climax. So 4 was my favorite chapter by far, and that's because you had the most to do, and you had the most to explore. So you had a whole map with many different islands on it. You're going back and forth, making trips to the different islands, exploring everything, and you have a list of goals. You have 5 keys to collect to unlock the secret, of course. I wouldn't consider that a spoiler. So you need to find the 5 keys, and there's a lot of stuff you have to do to get the 5 keys, and it's fun to me when you have multiple goals going on at the same time, because you can strategically like make voyages where it's like, okay, I know I need to go to this island to achieve this goal, but I can also try to do this other thing, and then we got to go to this place so that we can then go to this place. I really like the back and forth kind of stuff. So I like the fact that there's all these different things on your checklist, which they actually added to-do list in this game, which helps you remind yourself of what your objective is, which is cool. I like having options and being able to explore at my own pace. And if I get stuck on one puzzle, I can just move on to something else and come back to it. And maybe I'll find an item that I need for that other puzzle and whatnot. So I really liked Chapter 4. They had the best puzzles in there, and some really creative setups. They got new islands, new biomes. They all look distinct, and they all have their own jokes to them. There's one part where you have to become the queen of this island, and you have to win various contests to become queen. So there's a lot of funny stuff. So I love the puzzle solving. We got Stan. I forgot to mention Stan earlier, but the used car salesman / coffin salesman / lawyer. He's been a lot of things over the years, but he's always moving the arms. He's the one of the funnier characters in this. I absolutely love his contribution to this, and there's a lot of stuff relating to him in that chapter that's really funny. There's a lot of jokes about scurvy, and people they think it's contagious, but Elaine's trying to tell people, no, you just have to eat fruit, but of course can't convince pirates to do that. Forgot to mention there's 2 difficulty modes. I played it on the hard difficulty. I couldn't tell you the difference, but if you played these games before, I recommend the hard difficulty. You might as well. The game gives you a hint book regardless, which I honestly would have preferred it if the hard mode didn't have it. But there's a hint book, and it's interesting. I like the idea that, people are going to be searching for the walkthroughs anyway if they get stuck, so you might as well provide a resource in the game itself. I understand the thought process behind it, and I like how it gives you hints and doesn't just tell you the answers. So I like, and there's layers to it. Like, they'll start with an easy hint. If anybody ever used the site UHS Hints, it's like that. So, you start with a basic hint, and if you need something a little more, etc. So I don't have an issue with the hint system. I would have liked the option not to have it, because I was tempted to use it. Like twice, I think I used it. And I was like, oh, I wish I didn't. So I resisted the temptation for later chapters, which was nice. So I mentioned a lot of the things that worked for me. I like simplifying the gameplay in terms of interface, but making it complicated still, especially in that Chapter 4. And it's not like the best puzzles I've ever seen in an adventure game, but this is above the average for sure. And this is about on par with the puzzles from the early games, I would say. So I thought it was interesting that they included a hint book for everybody, especially because the game does so much to give you hints in dialogue. Like, the dialogue, if you listen carefully, pretty much tells you what you need to do. So I think it's interesting that they included that. But I understand the decision making. So I said a lot of the things that worked, a lot of the past characters I loved. I mean, Murray, Stan. Yeah, I was basically laughing this entire game. Every scene had funny stuff in it. It lifted my spirits, guys. The nostalgia and the humor really brings up my love for this franchise. So I really like this series. I just want to talk briefly about the art style, because there's a lot of hubbub about it before the game came out from fans. A lot of people didn't like the new art style, and my first initial reaction was to be kind of indifferent to it. I was just more excited about the fact that there is a new Monkey Island than I was. I didn't even really consider the art as like bad or an issue. It's just a new art style. I was like, okay, cool. Honestly, there's so much about this game that's similar. We need something a little new. So that new art style, I think, was the new thing that they needed to add. So they needed to progress the series forward in some way. I like the art style. I love the color scheme. It's a lot more vibrant. The colors really pop. There's a lot of neon, contrasty kind of color stuff. It's an angular look. It's not going for that clean 90s animation Disney style like Curse of Monkey Island was. I like the direction they went with it, and I ultimately ended up loving it. I went from being indifferent to loving it. So I think they make really good use of the art style for the environments that you get. We get a lot of new environments. In fact, it has a new art style. It is familiar enough. Like, there's things that look exactly the same. Like, when you pull up to Melee Island for the first time, it looks exactly the same. So it's recognizable, but it's new. It's old, but it's new at the same time. So I love the art style. Your mileage may vary. Even if you don't like the art style, you're going to love everything else about the game. If you're a Monkey Island fan, you can say, I don't like the art style, but the game is good. I think you will. So that's one thing. The other good thing is the music. They put a ton of budget into the music. There's a lot of instruments here, professionally done, and the music was a lot of what set the scene and the atmosphere for the old games. So putting a lot into the music, investing it paid off. It really works, and it was so good. It's one of the best scores they've ever done, and this is a series known well for its scores. So I love the music. The sound design is also, I think, I would say, the best in the series. There's no really comparison. They do a lot to, like, every footstep you hear, and it'll change depending on whether you're walking in snow, whether you're walking on, whatever surface it is. Now, I don't think most people are going to notice, which is exactly how it should be. So I like the sound design. And now we're going to transition into some of the cons that I have. But before we get into any cons, I don't want people getting the wrong idea. So we're just going to say, highly recommend this game. It doesn't top Monkey Island 1 or 2. I don't think there's any way realistically you really could do that. The first game was so fresh and new, and the sequel had so much creative energy in it. It was really, it really stood out, even for its time, and it has a timelessness to it. I think that this game ranks below those two, but it is in the conversation of which one you like better of the sequels. So I would say it is more in line with the first two games than any of the other sequels. So for that reason, I'm inclined to put it above even Curse, which I Curse might be my personal favorite of the sequels. But yeah, it's a bit more in line in terms of storytelling and content and the style of the writing than the other sequels. So I would rank it highly in that. So this is above Escape, and I did like what they're going for with Tales of Monkey Island, with adding a bit more drama to it, and there's a lot to like in that game. But they did some weird stuff, like Voodoo Lady turned out to be evil, and it almost took itself a little too seriously. So I'm glad we kind of took it back to what it is now. Now we're going to transition into some of the cons. So what are the cons? Elaine, of course, is back in this game. They got Guybrush and Elaine got married in the third game, and that is canon in this one. I gotta say, Elaine is not really fun in this. In the old ones, she was spunky, she was aggressive, she was a fighter, she could use a sword well, better than Guybrush, and it was funny because the whole mission that Guybrush went on in the first one was to save Elaine. And it turned out that, he was not good at saving her, and she was fine on her own. She actually saved herself, and the whole adventure just ended up being pointless. That is, in fact, the point. And that is what made it so special, right? It sounds like it would be a bad story on paper, but you got to understand the tone. It's that comedic tone, the satire, the jokes, and all of that. That is what we were playing Monkey Island for. So I like the Elaine character. She's almost like kind of a lot of the over-the-top feminist protagonists we get nowadays. But it came from the 90s, a time when that wasn't the norm. So her character was meant to be it was meant to be amusing. It wasn't meant to be some type of like societal statement like it is nowadays. So it almost sounds like a character from, it's like a stereotype nowadays, but back then it was fresh and new, right? So I like the Elaine character is what I'm saying. I liked her a lot in the past. This game, she's not fun because she's not joining in on the adventure. She's off doing her own thing. She's concerned about being the governor. She's trying to get hurricane relief, and she's trying to stop the scurvy spread. And like I said, the scurvy thing and the governor thing, all that adds to a lot of humor. There's a lot of funny parts related to that when you have to get the marketing. You got to get Stan to help out with the marketing for scurvy to get people to eat limes, and you gotta lie about it to get people to eat. It's really funny, okay? But having her off doing her own thing, just constantly with these projects going on, it just wasn't. It just wasn't a fun character, you know. And she did fight a little bit at the end, but for the most part, that's not really what defined her as a character. So anytime that she was on screen with Guybrush, it was just kind of like really lovey-dovey, sappy dialogue, and in a game so sarcastic and with writing that it is self-referential, self-deprecating, and all that stuff I keep mentioning over and over again, it doesn't come off as genuine. So that doesn't really work for me. I didn't like the sappy romantic dialogue stuff. It was just over the top for me. I didn't like it. I would have rather seen, you know, not that they have to be at odds with each other, but I would have liked to see a little bit of, you know, them bickering about something unimportant. I mean, that it's just that humor can come from that. And there's even like throughout the game they had Elaine stumble upon things that Guybrush did that she wouldn't approve of. So she found, you know, him destroying the environment for his own personal gain, all that type of stuff, him hurting people, screwing people over. She discovered all this, and then she doesn't confront him about it. She's just like, oh, it's whatever, you know. I was like, okay, well, what's the point of having her? I don't know. It seems at odds with her character now. She's not acting like a pirate, so, you know, having her on board with all Guybrush's stuff, it just didn't. It just felt weird. So yeah, the Elaine character didn't really work for me, and you can definitely tell it's written from a certain political perspective. I mean, she's talking about social programs and stuff like that. So, but I think her projects and everything are set up in the story, and they make sense, and they lead to humorous things that happen later on. So ultimately, it didn't really bother me. But if you're sensitive to that type thing, it might bother you. But it's really not over the top like how a lot of stuff is nowadays. It's just a couple scenes here and there, and it's not a big deal, is what I'm trying to say. But they don't endear me to Elaine as a character and make me invested in what her projects are. The other biggest drawback for me was a gameplay thing, and that's the fact that your inventory got so cluttered by the end. There's all these old items that you no longer need that just like linger in your inventory. And there's even like a pre-order bonus that was horse armor that it has no purpose and it just exists in your inventory. I thought that was kind of amusing. It's a funny joke. I like the joke, but I was kind of annoyed by it because I was like, it sounds like a downgrade for pre-ordering. I just have an extra item. Believe me, it does not matter at all because there's so many other things in the inventory. And I get it, they don't want you to get stuck anywhere and they're concerned about glitches and stuff. And I get that, but I would have really liked it if some of the items, because it's just like, it just makes it harder to think through what you're doing, because sometimes you just look at the inventory just to maybe get an idea of things you could do, and it just makes that harder when there's a bunch of clutter in there. So yeah, the clutter kind of bothered me. And now we get into the ending, so if you don't want to hear about it, I get that. I'm not going to spoil it exactly, but I'm just going to speak about it in general. So if you want to leave now, I think you got all my ideas about it, and thanks for watching. Peace out. So the ending tried to recapture the ending of the second game, where there's like this weird twist, and it's like, what really happened, and etc., etc., and then it tries to make a kind of a point about it. It just wants to leave you with something to think about. But really, it kind of felt like a cop-out ending. It kind of just feels like, I don't want to spoil it exactly, but you're searching for this thing, and then you find the thing, and then obviously our expectation based on the past of the series is that the thing you're looking for is going to be useless. Like, that's what we're expecting. So having that be the big twist at the end doesn't really work for me because we're expecting it. The other part is, I don't think they went far enough with the weirdness, and it really felt like it happened so quick. It was like one thing that happens, and then the epilogue scene with the frame story going back to Guybrush and his son. That's how it ends. And it just felt so quick. It wasn't satisfying. If we're going to do that weird ending, I'm not against doing a weird ending. But our expectations are a bit higher now, because back in the day when they made that second game, that ending was really weird. There wasn't a game that made an ending like that. Now storytelling in games has been around for decades. So we've had stories with weird endings like this, it's almost a meme. You know, I think if like Bioshock Infinite came out today, like that's kind of that type of ending is kind of a meme now. And as much as I love the ending of that game, don't get me wrong. So the ending, I like what they were going for. It just felt rushed. The point they're trying to make at the end is that it's not the destination, it's the journey. And I agree with that, but I don't think it's good writing advice, and they try to apply it to storytelling. I don't think it's the best writing advice because the ending is what people... It's the last impression that's going to be left on people's mind. It's what they're going to remember the most. If it's not a satisfying ending, the middle part doesn't matter. So to them, that is, you know, it does matter, but it doesn't matter to that person. They're just gonna associate the ending with the thing. So the ending is almost the most important thing that happens in a story. So it makes the middle part feel earned. The game is trying to say that the middle part of a story is the most important part. And in a way, I agree with that, but you need a strong ending to make the middle part feel significant. That ending, in a lot of ways, retroactively gives the middle part more meaning because all the things that were set up in the middle and the beginning all get paid off in a way that is satisfying. So in conclusion, I kind of disagree with the message at the end, although I understand what they were trying to say, and certainly as a writer, the middle part can be the most fun, and gameplay wise it's the most fun, although the puzzle right before the final segment is also one of the better parts. So that's pretty much the conclusion of this. If you're a Monkey Island fan, please support this. I want more. We need Ron Gilbert to make another one. Well, I don't know if he wants to. I hope he does because I found this very enjoyable. So that's my review of the new Monkey Island game, Return to Monkey Island, guys. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. With that, it's been your boy Shuggy, and thanks for watching, everybody. Peace out.